Hi, Gil Ferreira again here from Preserve Pigs. In today's Q&A, I'm going to look at a question that arises many times on the meat forums and platforms, and that simply is, should I have a fan in my curing chamber, and how much airflow should I have? Okay, so let's just get into a bit of perspective here, and this will probably answer your question. Once you've cured your meat in your salt solution and you're ready to hang it, what we're trying to emulate in our hanging conditions is the conditions that have been traditionally used, and that is either a cave, which was used very long ago, or more recently subterranean cellars. Firstly, in this environment, the temperature and the humidity is generally what we're looking for when we're curing meats. But if you've been in a subterranean cellar, you certainly would have experienced that musty smell, which is obviously from the damp. And the other thing that may be prevalent is that the air around you will feel somewhat close. And the reason for that is because there's very little airflow in subterranean cellars or caves or anything of the like. And obviously, in modern days, with building regulations and that sort of thing, it is a requirement for cellars to have air vents in order to bring some air into the cellar itself in case there are humans in there and you need to breathe. But those vents will not create strong airflow. So I guess from just giving you a little bit of background of how and what was used traditionally, you'll understand now what my solution or my answer is going to be. No, you do not want any airflow. And let me explain it a little bit more. So the major problem with the airflow as it passes over the meat is that it's going to dehydrate the surface of the meat faster than it'll dehydrate the insides. And this is going to create a scenario called case hardening, whereby the outer layer of the meat has dried faster and become a bit harder than the inside. And what this does is then it prevents the moisture from inside to escape. And what will then happen is obviously the meat can spoil from the inside. By adding airflow, it's going to dehydrate the outer layers much quicker, and then obviously you're going to have this problem of case hardening. You need to remember that the reason why we need such high humidity in a curing environment is so that we cure the meat, or we dry out the meat evenly, so that your exterior and your interior have pretty much the same consistency. And that is achieved by the humidity. Now, by adding that air, as I've explained earlier, it's going to create the adverse effect by just drying out the outside quite quickly. All right, now let's have a look at the scenario that most home curers find themselves in. Most of us are not fortunate enough to live in a home where there is a subterranean cellar. Some of the older buildings around will have cellars, and if you are fortunate enough to have one, then that's fantastic. But most of us, like myself, have converted old refrigerators or refrigerators that we've bought into a curing environment. And even the larger fridges that are used, like a double door drinks fridge, even these larger chambers are actually relatively small if you look at the inside space that is available. And in this space, if you are adding any kind of flowing air, even if it's with a very small fan, it is going to start creating airflow, and it's going to create far more problems than you solve with it. In some cases, it is, that's the one thing I see quite often. In some cases, it's pointed out that some fridges do come with fans already built in order to disperse the cold air evenly. And this is particularly in the case of drinks fridges that have been converted. And in this scenario, I would suggest to people that they need to find a way to disperse that air so that it doesn't flow over the meat, and that you do by making certain fairings and so forth to disperse the air above the meat so that it doesn't actually impede or flow over the meat directly. There is a way to be able to understand and know if there's too much flow of air in the chamber, and that is by simply hanging a piece of butcher's twine, or you can hang a couple of lengths of butcher's twine throughout your chamber, just to see, because if there is a fan built in already that you can't remove, you are going to get airflows in different parts of the chamber. So I would suggest hanging them all over the chamber once you've done your setup, and to see if that string moves. And if the string has any kind of movement in it, it means that there is too much airflow in the chamber and you need to solve that problem. If you've got a fridge like mine where there is no fan, you certainly are not going to go and add an additional fan to that, because again, as I said, that's just going to create more problems. And I'm quite passionate about this, because I don't know, it's only in the recent few years that I've seen YouTube videos where people are insistent on putting fans into curing chambers, and there's absolutely no reason for having a fan inside your chamber. Right, now I know a lot of people will say, well, Gil, that's absolute and utter nonsense, because you do need airflow in order to replace the stale air with fresh air. So yes, I agree with you. It's very important to replace stale air in the chamber. You do not want any stale air. But think about it logically. If you've got a fan inside your chamber that's blowing, all it's simply doing is just circulating that stale air. So you're not actually solving the problem. Okay? And then that stale air is still blowing over your meat. In order to remove the stale air, simple thing, and as I say to every beginner, you need to check your meats at least once a day, if not every second or third day maximum, that you should leave your meats unattended. And every time you open your chamber door, the air is going to circulate and you're going to get fresh air into your chamber, and the stale air is going to be displaced. So that's all you need, is simply open your door, check your meats once a day for a minute. I mean, I try not to open my chamber for longer than 2 minutes. Open it, that air is replaced, close your chamber, and that's it. Tomorrow you do the same thing. The air doesn't go that stale that quickly. Obviously, if you're going to leave it for a number of days on end, then yes, then you're going to have a problem, and that stale air is obviously unwanted, and it can affect the flavor profiles in your meat. But quite honestly, a fan is not going to do anything. The other thing that I have also seen, and people start getting clever, and they say, yeah, but we've created a fan where that sucks out the stale air. So they drill a hole in the side of their chamber, and they place a fan that actually is a reverse fan, and basically sucks out the air from the chamber, which is then replaced, obviously. But then again, here are a couple of scenarios. Firstly, you're drilling a hole into the chamber. We don't necessarily know where the cooling conduits and all that sort of stuff and the electrical wires run through the fridge. So you're running a risk of damaging the fridge when you're manufacturing it. But if you do even you're creating another hole in your chamber. And as you know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a specific climate within our chamber with a specific temperature and a specific humidity. And obviously, if there's holes where the temperature and humidity can equalize itself with the ambient temperature, that's going to take place. So you're going to use a lot more energy to cool down your chamber. You're going to use a lot more energy to make sure that the humidity is where it needs to be. So again, it causes more problems than what it solves. And then lastly, if you do make a hole in the side of your chamber, even with a fan in it, it again gives the opportunity for insects to get in. Even if you put mesh on, it still gives an opportunity for microbes, unwanted microbes and insects and stuff to be able to get into your curing chamber. So for me, there really is no situation that actually warrants putting a fan into your chamber. So if you are going to be insistent in having a fan in your chamber to suck out the stale air because you aren't able to check your chamber every single day for whatever reason, the chamber, your curing environment is at a property away from your home, that's up to you. Again, I'm going to implore you to be very careful, because leaving the meats alone for longer than a day, for longer than 3 days is really a no-no in my books. But if that's what you want to do, then the last thing I would suggest is that you at least test the inside of your chamber with a fan, sucking the air out, using some butcher's twine, and making sure that butcher's twine doesn't move inside your chamber. Otherwise, you have got too much airflow, and that is going to cause case hardening. Just to, again, another scenario that I often see is in people come back with quite clever quips and say, yeah, but in some instances, airflow is permitted, for example, in the curing of culatello. But you've got to understand that when airflow is permitted, like, if I'm making biltong, for example, a South African cured meat, airflow is a prerequisite in order to do that. But there I'm trying to dehydrate the meat as quickly as I possibly can, not as slowly as I possibly can. So airflow is a prerequisite. So I have to have airflow. In the case of Culatella, there's also very specific reasons why the mist is allowed to flow through these conditions. Anyway, you can go and research that, and I will also be extensively talking about Culatella in subsequent videos. But yes, there are certain instances where airflow is permitted, but those are very specific scenarios. In your case, you don't want any airflow. So my take home is no fan. Absolutely no fan. It has no business in your curing chamber for any reason at all. I really hope that this does clarify that particular issue. Obviously, if you have any more questions on this issue or any other issue you have in your curing meats, then please send an email to me at questions@preservedpigs.com, and I will certainly address them and hopefully make a video of that question and post it here. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my YouTube channel.